Hello, everyone. I'm the Scarred Storyteller, and I'm here to help you unwind today. If you're using this video to fall asleep, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel before you drift off. By the way, where are you watching from? And what time is it for you? Now, get cozy, relax, and let's begin. It was the kind of night that whispered secrets to those who dared to listen. The small town of Black Hollow lay shrouded in a dense fog, the flickering streetlights casting trembling halos of light that barely penetrated the murk. Emma Harding gripped the steering wheel as her car trundled over the uneven road. Her tired eyes kept darting to the GPS, its dim screen glowing ominously in the cabin of her car. Ravenwood House, destination in 2 miles, it displayed in monotone text, as though the place wasn't notorious, as though it didn't have a reputation for swallowing the curious whole. Emma wasn't the superstitious type, but even she couldn't deny the creeping unease scratching at the base of her spine. She'd been hired to document the historical, decrepit old mansion perched at the edge of Black Hollow, an extraordinary find for the historian she was. Yet, even as she approached, Ravenwood's history began to feel less like an academic curiosity and more like a predator lurking in the wings. When her GPS pinged, signaling she had arrived, Emma slowed to a crawl and studied the estate that loomed before her. The once grand mansion stood defiant against time, its jagged silhouette cutting into the dim light of the full moon. The large iron gates creaked open the moment Emma stepped out of her car, though she had yet to even touch them. A gust of wind rattled through the surrounding forest, carrying with it a chill that felt almost watchful. Inside, the air was dank and heavy, and her flashlight beam fell upon intricate yet dust-ridden furniture scattered haphazardly. She noted faint scratches trailing up the old wood-paneled walls. The strange etchings led her through the vast, eerie halls toward the library, a cavernous room where bookshelves reached upward like clawed fingers. A sudden crash shattered the oppressive silence. Emma whipped around, her breath hitching as her flashlight found something lying on the ground. It was a cracked mirror. But the reflection staring back wasn't her own. Chills raced down her spine as the twisted apparition in the glass mouthed words that she couldn't hear, its voice lost in some void too vast to comprehend. Panic set in, and Emma stumbled backward, desperate to escape. But she wasn't alone anymore. A rhythmic tapping sound echoed from somewhere deeper in the house, steady and deliberate. Tap, tap, tap. Still clutching her flashlight, Emma followed the sound, certain the source of the noise held answers, or perhaps just more questions. To her horror, the tapping led her to a room hidden behind a false bookshelf. Inside, a locked trunk sat in the center of the room, damp and sealed with rusty chains that dripped as though bleeding from unseen wounds. Despite her fear, she couldn't resist. She pulled at a nearby lever, and the chains unraveled with a groan that sounded almost alive. Inside the trunk was a diary, its leather binding pulsating faintly under her trembling fingers. When she opened it, Emma realized these were no ordinary entries. They weren't written in ink but in crimson strokes that smelled like copper. The pages seemed to write and erase themselves, detailing torment after torment inflicted upon the house's past trespassers. Then the writing stopped. A single ominous phrase appeared at the bottom of the page. "You're next." Everything around her began to warp. The walls trembled, the air took on a malevolent heat, and the tapping returned, but louder, faster, and dangerously close. This wasn't just a house with secrets. It was alive, and it had been waiting for her. The climax hit her violently. Cold hands grasped at her limbs as the house screamed. Emma's flashlight died, leaving her to confront the pulsing, twisted heart of Ravenwood in the deafening dark. And then, silence. When dawn broke, her car sat outside, abandoned. Emma Harding was never seen again. But in the reopened library, a new book had appeared overnight. A biography of an ambitious historian who ignored every warning she should have heeded. Story 2. Beneath the dense canopy of the Black Ridge Forest, an unnatural stillness hung in the air. The sun struggled to pierce through the gnarled branches, casting faint, skeletal shadows along the forest floor. Charlotte had been warned about these woods, tales of the vanished, whispers of the cursed. But desperation led her here. Her sister Edie had disappeared 2 weeks ago, last seen entering this very forest, and no search party had dared venture beyond its edge. Armed with a dim flashlight and the fading courage of her determination, Charlotte pressed on. A strange fog began to creep in, curling around her ankles like ghostly fingers. The deeper she went, the more the air felt suffocating, carrying faint whispers that seemed to bleed into her mind. At first, she dismissed them as gusts of wind, until one whisper clearly called her name. Charlotte. She froze in place, the light from her flashlight quivering as her hands trembled. "Hello?" she called out, her voice cutting through the overwhelming silence. The only response was the distant snap of a branch. It was enough to propel her feet forward, faster now, crashing through the underbrush. She had seen something, or someone, flicker just beyond the edge of her vision. Could it be Edie? But what Charlotte found was far from human. At the base of an ancient, twisted oak tree, a tangle of roots jutted out like skeletal arms, encircling a crumbling, moss-covered stone altar. Inscribed across the edges were symbols she couldn't understand, symbols that seemed to shimmer and shift as she looked at them. Her breath caught as a faint, broken sob emanated from the shadows behind the tree. "Edie?" she whispered as she moved closer, her voice barely audible over her pounding heart. She rounded the tree, dropping to her knees at what she saw. Her sister's pendant lay on the ground, but Edie was nowhere to be found. Instead, claw marks were gouged deep into the bark of the tree beside her, like desperate attempts to escape something far worse. A chilling realization began to take hold. This wasn't just a forest, it was alive, sentient, and hungry. Whispers turned to guttural growls as an oppressive darkness began to close in around her. Charlotte's flashlight flickered and died, leaving her in utter blackness. But it wasn't the dark that frightened her most, it was the sound of something wet, heavy, and breathing just behind her. What happened to Edie was no longer a mystery. Now, Charlotte's only hope was to fight the forest itself, or disappear into its maw like all those who came before her.